In the dark of a room, the screen flickers low. A boy with a passion ready to show. He edits with precision, cuts like a knife, creating a masterpiece. His art comes to life. Dylan Bass, the final cut rolls, making editing tricks, throws hoops in the flow. Picture in picture, his skills are sublime, inspiring students, they're learning on time. In the depths of his mind, emotions run deep. Through the pain and the sorrows, tears start to seep. With every frame he captures, a story unfolds, expressing his anguish, his heartaches untold. In the depths of his mind, emotions run deep. Through the pain and the sorrows, tears start to seep. With every frame he captures, a story unfolds, expressing his anguish, his heartaches untold. Behind the lens, a world unseen, Dylan Bass, the editing machine. From cuts so sharp to transition smooth, in every project, it's all he proves. A mentor to many friends of old, opening creativity's boundless door. With dedication, his legacy grows, and we know how to feel his passion shows. Oh, Dylan Bass, in the silence of the edit bay, you found the words you could not say. Through cuts and clips, you paved the way for stories to live, for hearts to sway. In the glow of a screen, you've shown us light, transforming darkness into sight so bright. Dylan Bass, with every edit, every scene, you remind us what creating truly means. Oh, Dylan Bass. The master of the screen, teaching us video editing trees. Those rooms and pictures, craft so fine. We'll learn from him and create our own design.
Hey, all of you beautiful people. I'm hoping everything is working okay because I am not as prepared as I really wanted to be for this stream. I woke up feeling super good and decided to go for a run, and I hit 10 miles, and I'm super stoked about that. But it really ate into the time that I had to prep for this stream. So hopefully everything goes okay. Let me know if you guys can hear me. And if you guys liked that song, that was from Patrick Masters Productions. He is a legend. So I just thought that song was super fun. It's way more epic than I'll ever be, but but it really made my day. So make sure you go follow his channel down in the description. There was a dog that appeared for a second here. Really, that's why everybody comes to the stream. So I'll just let the dog take over from here. But anyway, I am so excited. I have been insanely swamped with trying to pull together my Apple Motion course. And I am putting everything I've got into it. But because of that, it's really eating into the time that I have to make videos for the channel. So I thought maybe I should just try and live stream some motion content on the channel, because I was trying to do 2 videos a week and having fully edited motion videos. Unfortunately, the time is just not there. So I thought, you know what, let's do some live motion videos. They'll kind of be a mini course, just a little taste of what you'll see with the final course when it comes out. I'm very, very excited about that. There'll definitely be more info on the channel as soon as I can get it there. It's taking a lot more time than I thought it would, but I'm very, very excited. There's just so much information packed into it, and I've got my brother helping me edit, and it's just turning out really, really solid. So very excited about it. But with that being said, I have been constantly getting asked, can you make a video about editing like Magnets Media? I don't know that I have the skill set to match Magnets Media's editing levels, but I'm going to do my very best. We're going to do it all in Apple Motion. I'm going to be using some Affinity Photo to cut out some of the stuff we need. But yeah, it should be a really fun time. There's just a lot of nuances that are hard to pull together inside of a full tutorial. Also, one other note, I am very sorry if I cough at all. When I go for a long run, I always get a cough for the day. So I'm very sorry. I do have tea here. I'm hoping that that will help with that. We'll go ahead and get some of that going. Let me know if you guys are hearing everything okay. I appreciate you all stopping by. Looking for it here. I can click on some of these comments. Pop some of those up. Doggo in the background. Hi, puppy. Hey, hey. Quentin, glad you're here. Love from India. I am so grateful you guys are all here. So let's go ahead and take a dive into Motion. And I haven't done a live stream in a while, so sorry if things are a bit rusty. Here we are in the old Motion window. And if you don't get this lovely project browser here, you can go ahead and go on up to File, select New from Project Browser. Now, for the purposes of keeping everything running smooth on my computer today, we're just going to work in a 1080p timeline. Normally, I would like to work with 4K. That way, when I get into Final Cut Pro, I have a little extra latitude to push things around. But today, we'll stick with 1080p. I'm also going to stick with a 2997 frame rate and a duration of 10 seconds. And you should be good. Now, normally, a lot of people know that I like to use one of the fancy Final Cut titles or generators or transitions, but in this case, we're not really building this out to reuse it over and over again. We're just doing a one-off project. So this is gonna be more akin to making an After Effects project. So what we can do, and hopefully you guys, yep, you guys are still hearing me, I think. The mics are showing good. Let's go ahead and select the Motion project here in the top left, and we'll push open. And I should say, once I'm done with this whole video, I'm going to try and add in links to all of the media that I'm using. It's 95% from Envato Elements, and then I have one clip from Unsplash. So there is a link to Envato Elements down in the description. I personally recommend it. This is not sponsored. I use Envato Elements all the time. I'm paying for it with my own money. Super highly recommend. So if you are in need of a bazillion different stock elements, I would check Envato out. All right, so here we are in Motion, and everything should be looking clean and fancy. Mine might look a little bit different because I have my ruler enabled here, and I've got these coordinates. You can do those in the settings. But the first thing that we need to do is, I should have thought about this before I opened Motion. We need to cut out some of these photos that we're going to work with. So let's go ahead and take a look in Finder. And Finder is opening up on my other window. And let's see if I can load up the media that we'll be using today. Got a bazillion videos here. And I was trying to do Magnets Media a while ago. There it is. And here are all the assets we're going to be using. So I'll just do a quick look through them. We've got our backdrop. This is going to be just filling up the entire frame. We've got a computer that we'll need to be cutting out. We've got the back of this person that will be standing in the shot. It's going to look really cinematic, trust me. I have an old project I was working with. Then on the computer, I want it to have kind of these text elements scrolling up so they look like a master hacker, because everybody knows that this is authentic to what hackers do. It looks perfectly like this. So, and then this is also an additional element we'll be adding in to add some nice depth to the whole scene. Then there's these really nice dust elements just coming through. We're gonna layer those so they feel real 3D dimensional. And then, of course, Magnets Media specifically is known for these really cool looking ink transitions. So again, I got all of this from over on Envato Elements. And I will try and link all of these below. I was trying to do it before I started the stream, but I decided to go for a run instead. So, so what we need to do is actually cut out this person first. Now, I am very lazy, and fortunately, Apple added in a handy feature for cutting out people. So I can just right click on this photo, and we can go on down to quick actions and select remove background. So if you have the latest version of macOS, you should be able to do this, and bada boom, bada bing, we have cut out this person. Now, I personally am not super stoked on the way the edges worked here, so you're not gonna always have perfect results, and that is why I actually really love using Pixelmator. So Pixelmator has some really incredible tools for kind of refining the edges, and it does it all automatically. So we can go to quick actions and select remove background, but I'm using the Pixelmator version this time around. And we'll go ahead and let it do that. It's gonna take a little bit longer because it's doing more steps. There we go. And let's go ahead and take a look at how that worked. Boom, just like that, we have cut out this person from the backdrop. It is a little bit messy on the edges, so if I was still struggling with that and I really wanted this to look as high quality as possible, then I would just go in and cut it out with either the pen tool or just using kind of a draw mask thing. So, but for the sake of keeping this nice and short, we'll go ahead and just work with this, and we're gonna add in some nice light bleed on the edges, so that's gonna kind of cover that up. So we've got our person cut out. We need to also cut out this computer screen, so I'm gonna go ahead and just open this up in Affinity Photo. So we'll go ahead and do just that. How are you guys all doing? GovCorp's asking if there are plugins for QR codes. That is a good question. I don't know. I wish I knew that. Yes, it is built into the operating system. You have to have the latest version of macOS. I don't think it was on the last one. Somebody could correct me down in the comments. And then, yes, Pixelmator also gets embedded to your right click. You can add that into your quick actions menu, which is so handy. But I am not going to trust Pixelmator to cut this out. No, I don't need an update right now. So we're going to go and cut this computer out. Fortunately, it's really sharp edges, so hopefully this won't take too long. But yeah, let me know where you guys are watching from in the world. I would love to, when I watch the replay of this stream, because I'm apparently self-obsessed and I have to watch everything that I make. This is going to be so messy. You know what? My hand is shaking, probably from my run, so I don't recommend run right before you do a live stream, but you know, it was worth it. There we go, doing the old-fashioned cutout. Nothing fancy here, just chopping it out. It doesn't really need to be all that clean. Fortunately, that stand is actually going to be covered up by the person, so that'll be cool. I don't need to get super refined with that. And let's go ahead and just mask this out. So we have our basic computer cut out, and I don't really want to deal with all the extra bezels, I guess, on this. So let's go ahead and crop in on this. No, I need it to be a cut. Let's do unconstrained and set it to be, maybe, where are we going? Let's go 1 by 1. That made it super tiny. Trust me, I do this professionally. Alrighty, we'll get in here and apply that. And actually, just to make my life easier in motion, I'm gonna also cut out the screen here. This is why I'm not the Affinity Photo bro. If you want some really good Affinity Photo tutorials, by the way, go to Affinity Revolution. They are the Final Cut bro of Affinity Photo, so highly recommend. Let's go ahead and delete that as well. Boom. So we've got our computer cut out. It doesn't need to be that complex. So we'll go ahead and export this as a PNG. And I'll keep it a nice high resolution. And this specific photo is one that I got from Unsplash. Everything else is from Envato Elements. Let us find, man, where's my folder that I'm working with here? My brain is shot. Where did that go? Oh, I'm literally looking at it. All right, well, it's not gonna be perfect. Computer screen, and I'll just recall it cutout, so that way I have the original if I need to go back. Okay, it's time to bring this stuff into motion. Let's do it. So I've opened Motion, and I'm gonna go ahead and just push Command I to import, and we can go ahead and locate it here. Where's my Edit Like Magnets Media, Assets, Images, and I've got everything in here. So I'm just gonna drop it all in. And I didn't actually need the original person, so I'll delete that. And I don't need the original computer, so I'll delete that as well. So everything is super zoomed in here, but that is not a problem. We'll go ahead and scale it down here in just a bit. But what we need to do is kind of layer these in the way that we want them to appear in our 3D image. So of course, at the very bottom, I want the backdrop, so that's perfect. Behind the computer screen here, I'm gonna want the original computer screen, so I'll go ahead and drop that there. I want this secondary computer screen to be at the very top of everything because we're gonna use this to add some 3D dimension. So I'm just gonna place that up above everything. This dust element, I'm gonna want multiples of this dust element. So I actually want one above our person, and I'm gonna push Command D to duplicate it and drop another one just in front of our backdrop. And I'm actually gonna call this dust 2, just to keep things as organized as I can. This ink drops, we are gonna want it outside of everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and just place that completely outside of the group. And now we have everything kind of layered up here in the way that I relatively want it. And of course we can move these around as needed. But right now, if you take a look, you will notice this little tiny icon next to our group. And that is actually just indicating that this is a 2D group. And why that's important is because if I were to add in any sort of 3D camera to this scene, which we will be doing, none of that stuff would be affected by the 3D camera moving back and forth in Z space. So it's important that we have it all set to a 3D layer. So I'll go ahead and just do just that. And now that we've done that, we can see the image icon has changed over to this kind of 3-layer stack. I should have activated my little zoomer tool, but I don't. I didn't. But yeah, you can see that layer stack there happening now. So that's just letting us know that this is in fact a 3D group, and that will work with a 3D camera. Very, very cool. Okay, so I am gonna go ahead and hide everything except for our backdrop, and you can actually do that by pushing Option and then clicking on that layer. And so everything has been deselected except for the backdrop. So we just need to get this first backdrop set. We want it way far back in 3D space. So let's jump on over to our inspector and go to our properties. And the position parameter, you'll notice, is just showing an X and Y parameter. But we can actually expand that out. And you'll see that there's a third dimension here that we can push this in. That's the Z space. So now we can throw it way far back in Z space. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And if I just click and drag directly on the number, we can see how that's shrinking back. If it's not shrinking back far enough and I want it to move way faster, I can actually hold down Shift, and now it's going to be way faster in how much it's pushing back. So we definitely want to give us just a little bit of space here on the edges. We don't want to have the entire backdrop all within the frame, but we've moved it back negative 4,647 pixels. That's feeling pretty good to me. So I can go ahead and now we can enable this dust element. And again, I just pushed Option and clicked on that checkbox. So now everything else is disabled. We've soloed this dust element. And once again, we're gonna need to move this back in 3D space. But what we can do is kind of just figure out, okay, so the backdrop is negative 4,600 pixels back. So maybe we want just this dust element to be a little bit in front of that. So maybe let's do a Z space of negative 3,500. So it's now around 1,000 pixels closer to the camera. And that's just gonna give us that parallax effect as we move this camera. From there though, you'll notice that our edges are way inside of the frame. If I push Shift T, we can see where it's transparent here. So we really want this dust element to be filling out the entire frame. So let's go ahead and just scale that bad boy up and I'm selecting the wrong dust element because I'm a noob. There we go. So we'll just scale that up a bit. We do want to give us, again, just a little bit of space here on the edges because this camera is going to be moving back a bit. And so we want to make sure that everything stays within the scene. Otherwise, it's going to look really bad having those cut off edges on the sides. Now, you'll see down here, we've got our blend mode, and we want that blend mode enabled. Here, I'll go ahead and re-enable everything. Maybe I can just enable, can I do that? Maybe I can't. I'm still learning stuff, guys. Here we go. Well, I'll just disable all of these other ones. That way we can hopefully see what's going on. Okay, there we go. So we've got our dust 2, and I'm going to change the blend mode on this. And for those of you that don't know what a blend mode is, super bare bones description. It kind of tells Motion and Final Cut Pro how to work with the colors and what values can add transparency to an image and what values make it completely opaque. So in this instance, I'm going to select the screen blend mode, and this comes back from, you know, film days and all sorts of stuff like that. But again, so you'll see now that we have these dust elements over the backdrop, but anything that was black has been made completely transparent, and anything that's white has now been completely opaque. So this is a great way to remove black backgrounds. If you are adding in a muzzle flash or an explosion, something along those lines, these blend modes are your best friend. You don't have to use a Luma keyer. They're a lot nicer on processing power. So yeah, bare bones description of what a blend mode is. There we go. So the next thing we need to do is add in our computer screen. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that, and also we'll enable the backdrop of that computer screen. Let's go ahead and push this computer screen back in 3D space just a bit. Maybe -1000 is sounding pretty good to me. And the computer screen will make it -1001 so that it's kind of locked together with the actual computer screen itself. Now, as it is, they are still way too large because they're very large images, and that's great. That gives us extra resolution to work with. So let's go ahead and just scale this computer down a bit. That's looking pretty solid to me. And then we'll get our computer screen and scale that down as well. And fortunately, this video is a 16:9 image, and that screen is also 16:9, so technically I shouldn't have to do much. But yeah, that's looking pretty decent to me. It looks ugly right now, just bear with me. And I'm gonna go ahead and actually throw these into a group here. So we'll just group that up, and I might even scale it down just a little bit more maybe, somewhere in there. Okay, next, let's go ahead and add in our person. So this is where the main focus of the subject is going to be. We're going to be working with our 3D camera off of this person. So I actually want them to be in the very center of everything. So they are in Z of just 0. That's perfect. We love that. Let's go ahead and scale this down quite a bit. And we want them to look like they're, you know, interacting with the computer itself. But we definitely also want them to be the focus. So somewhere in there is looking pretty good to me. And that's, you know, that's why I'm doing this as a live stream, because a lot of this is the feeling. So I can't give exact instruction on how to make it look good or anything. I can just kind of say, this is where you put the stuff. Figure it out, I guess. I don't know. So I think doing it in a live stream allows me to kind of jump back and adjust stuff by the pixel numbers should I need to. So, and in this instance, I feel like this computer is actually a little bit too tiny. So I'm actually going to go ahead and scale that back up. Somewhere in there, that's looking pretty good. Okay. Next, let's go ahead and add in some more dust elements. And again, this is going to really tie in that 3D feel. So we'll re-enable those. And there we go. I want these to be forward by about 1,000 pixels or so. So I'll just do Z space of +1000. But right now it's way too large. If I zoom way out here, you can see how massive this is. So, and I don't want it to be quite that big. So let's go ahead and just scale those dust elements down. That's looking pretty good. Now, an issue we might run into is right now we have two of the exact same dust element. So what could happen is we would see the same dust particles kind of working in 3D space at the same time. So we need to offset these. So I'm just going to come on down here to the timeline, and slide this top dust element over to the left in time so that they're slightly offset from each other. I think that's going to help a lot with this effect. Another thing we could do is actually kind of rotate this dust element around so that it's flipped from the previous dust element. So again, that's going to kind of trick our brains into thinking they're totally different. You could just download multiple dust elements. That's a great way to do it too. But in this instance, I'm just going to go ahead and set them up like this. From there, let's go ahead and change our blend mode on over to screen once again. So now we're getting that multiple dust elements, and it might be hard to see on YouTube, but you can kind of see it working there if you're watching at maximum quality, I guess. And I'm gonna take a sip of some tea. There are 36 of you lovely people here. Thank you so much for stopping by. GlobeSync saying it's a little hard to keep up with. Okay, GlobeSync, I will try and tone it back a little bit. I just, I get excited. I'm just stoked to share it with you. So I'll try and hone in on it a little bit more. So now that we've got the two dust elements, that's going to really bring in that 3D feel. Trust me, once we get the cameras moving, this thing is going to be so rock solid. But at the very top here, we have one more computer element, and I kind of wanted this to signify, what's going on inside of this hacker's brain. That's the element I was going for. So we'll go ahead and select our computer screen, and once again, we're going to use the blend mode to get rid of all of this black. So let's go ahead and set the blend mode over to something like screen. You could do add to if you wanted to, but just see how that's kind of, it's almost lining up with our person, which is really cool. I just kind of like how that effect is working for us. But as it is, it's maybe a little bit, I want it to be even closer to the camera to get that 3D element. You'll see that I have this layer stack going on here, and we have the computer screen at the very top. But right now, as it is in Z space, which is that 3D space we're working with, you'll see that the dust element is actually in front of our computer screen. So the dust is at positive 1000 pixels, and our computer screen is at 0. So right now, the computer element is on the same plane, so we need to adjust for that. So let's go ahead and push this. I'm gonna go ahead and push it all the way to 2000 pixels. And that is gonna almost push it completely out of the frame, which is not quite what we want. So we need to scale it back. We're gonna shrink it down so that it fits within the camera space. Because as it gets closer to the camera, of course, that's going to make it larger. So we need to adjust for that. So I'm gonna bring this down quite a bit, and let's see how much we have on the edges here to work with. Oh, we still got a lot we can work with, so I can scale this even way further there. There we go, that's looking pretty solid. And I'm gonna slide this off to the right side somewhat, just making sure we don't accidentally bring in an edge, but I'm really liking that. So it's almost kind of framing our main character here, which is really powerful. Just kind of drawing your eye into that point. So we've got this backdrop that's got kind of these somewhat leading lines, not perfect, but you get the idea. There's some leading lines here, kind of all drawing our eye into that point. And then we've got these dust elements bringing in the 3D aspect of everything. We've got our computer screen, which is just bringing in some much needed life to the scene. We've got our person, which is going to be the core focus of our shot. And then we've got some extra 3D dimension on top of everything, kind of cluing us into what this person is looking at by adding in this overlay element. So all of this has been kind of split out between these different 3D layers. But as it is, I don't really have a way to adjust it. I don't have a way to kind of play around in the scene at all. So we need to actually add in a 3D camera. Motion does kind of have a fake 3D camera up until we add one. So we need to make sure we add it, and then we can actually animate this thing. So let's go on up to Add Object and select Camera. And just like that, we now have a 3D camera. Everything's gonna look exactly the same, but if we come on over here to the left side, you can see we have these additional controls. So we can change stuff like the angle of view, And you can see I'm kind of getting that cool, what's the name of that? I can't think of the name of that effect. Just really cool parallax. It's in the Jaws movie where when the guy sees the first shark attack and the camera's just kind of like dolly zoom. That's what I'm thinking of. That's what it looks like if you adjust this angle of view. So that's really cool. You could animate that by coming over here to the right and adding keyframes. So if that's something you want to do, you could do that. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at 45 for now. Now, another issue that a lot of people run into is as they're moving their camera, oftentimes stuff in the scene just vanishes, and it's really confusing as to why. That is usually because of these near and far planes. So as your camera is kind of panning back, pushing forward, it gets further from these elements, and Motion has these kind of dedicated parameters telling it how much stuff to render within the scene. So if you're ever running into that issue, you can just bring your far plane way up, and that should cover that issue. You can expand it a ton. Just know that the larger the space you've created, the more computing power it's going to have to take to figure out where all the elements in your scene are. So just keep that in mind. I'll go ahead and actually just leave it at 10,000 for now. That's looking pretty good. But you'll see if I drag it all the way down to 100, now I can almost see nothing. So that's kind of the idea there. And there's also a near fade. So as stuff gets closer to the screen, you can tell Motion when to start kind of pushing stuff out with its opacity. So if I bring in that near fade, you'll see how those really close-up elements start to fade out. So that is also really handy. And in fact, I might even bring that up a little bit. That way we're not clipping through the different video elements we've added in. And there is the far fade here. So you can see how this stuff in the distance is now fading out with that transparency layer I've added. Again, I enabled that with Shift T. You can come up here and enable transparent. But I'm going to go ahead and leave that at 0 for right now. Okay, so things are looking basic. Let's go ahead and add in some motion to this. So we'll jump on over into our properties and we'll find our position parameter. And you'll notice that as I move in Z space, everything has that real 3D parallax feeling, which I love. That's the effect we're going for. That's what Magnets Media has all over their videos. So we're gonna go ahead and just dial in the position of this camera by adjusting these different parameters. That's looking pretty cool. And I wanna kind of center it up on our person. And I'm gonna take my playhead to the very first frame. So this is going to be our starting most position. We could dial that in. Now, if we're feeling really fancy, there are parameter behaviors you can work with in Motion, but I don't want to take too much time getting into those. But they're up here. You can play around with them on your own. There's dolly, there's focus, framing, sweep. There's a whole bunch of them. I do have a tutorial that covers these. It's a little old and I've learned a lot about Motion since then, but it gets a lot of the core information out there. So if you're interested, you could look that up. Just look up 3D camera techniques for Apple Motion and I think you'll find it. Okay, but we are going to do this the old-fashioned way with some keyframes. So coming on over here to the left side, there's these gray diamonds. This is just like Final Cut Pro. You can add in keyframes, delete keyframes in the same way you would with Final Cut. So I'm gonna go ahead and click at the very top, and that is going to add a keyframe on all three of these parameters because we have X, Y, and Z. If we didn't want to add any sort of keyframes to the Y parameter or X parameter, then we could just click on the keyframe next to Z. So you do have that control where you can adjust just a singular parameter on its own if you want to, but that's not what we want for this specific scene. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and take our playhead to about the last 2 seconds or so. That's looking pretty good. And let's find the final position for it. So we'll jump back in Z space, making sure we don't cut off our person or the edges there. That's looking pretty good. We can slide it down somewhere in there, and I'm pretty happy with that. So because I added in a keyframe at the very beginning of everything, as I move my playhead forward and then make adjustments to that camera, it's going to automatically add in an additional keyframe, which is super handy. So everything should be slowly zooming out, giving us that 3D parallax effect. It is stuttering a little bit because I'm streaming here, but hopefully you're getting the idea there. So we've got this slow pan out, And I'm gonna make it even a little more dramatic. Let's push in even further on her head, like we're, you know, I don't know what we're trying to see what she's thinking about here. So we'll push play, camera's panning out. That's looking pretty interesting and cool. But there's quite a bit lacking in this scene, if you ask me, because sure, we have all these different cutout elements, but they're not the same color. There's no cohesion to anything. It just kind of feels like a bunch of cutout photos on top of each other. And I think that's where Magnet's media really excels, is that they have a cohesive color scheme to everything. They use a lot of reds and blues, and it just looks so stellar. So let's go ahead and figure out how to add in some of those elements here in Motion. Firstly, let's start with our backdrop here. So we'll go on up to filters, and there are many different color filters inside of Motion. We'll go on down to color, and you can see all of our different options here, many of which are found over in Final Cut, but there's even more so inside of Motion than there is in Final Cut Pro. And I'm just gonna go, let's see what I wanna do here. Maybe let's do hue saturation curves, because we can really push how these colors are working. So I'm gonna find my hue slider here on the left, and you can see how I can push everything to a color scheme just by raising and lowering the hue. So let's figure out what kind of color scheme we want. I'm gonna push it maybe more to the red-orange realm of things. Somewhere in there. That's looking pretty interesting. Maybe that's a little too pink. I don't know. Guys, I'm not good at color. I'm gonna say that. So could bring in a little saturation. And let's find it somewhere in there. It's a little orangey red, I guess. And let's drop down the luminance. So that's gonna give us some saturation in those highlights, but I think that's gonna really make the front pop. Then let's go ahead and do the same thing for our computer screen. So I'll go to filters, color, and let's go ahead and do hue saturation curves. And we can just push these to whatever color scheme we want. That's maybe too orange. I want more red. Danger. Somewhere in there, because apparently coders code in red now. I don't know. These hackers are getting creative, I guess. So we'll get that red. We could adjust the luma. And if you're somebody that's really good at color, you are going to excel in this area. That is not my strong suite. My strong suite is talking to a camera, I guess. So from there, we've got our computer, which is, we could push that a little bit. Let's go to color, and let's just go ahead and do color wheels this time. We can kind of push stuff just like we would in Final Cut. And I kind of want it to have a teal color to that computer because I'm cliche. And we'll go with kind of a reddish tone here on the highlights. It's all subjective. And then we've got our person. Now, specifically with this person, we don't want to push it too far. But we do want to kind of draw in some of the lighting from around the area. And so this is where we can get a little bit more technical with it. What I'm going to do, actually I'll throw this into a group. So let's just throw this person into a group, and we'll call it the person group. Now, I want to essentially create an outline around this person. So to do that, let's go ahead and push K, and that's going to create a clone layer. Now, clone layers in Motion are ridiculously cool. They're one of my favorite features. I have a lot of favorite features though, so I don't know if that's saying much. But the clone layer essentially will take on any changes we apply onto the original layer. So if I were to shift the color of this clone layer, or of the original layer, that clone layer would then receive those same changes. But we can add in our own effects individually to this clone layer that will not apply onto the original layer. So it's a great kind of one-way street where if I wanted to adjust the color on a whole bunch of layers at the same time, I'd just go to the main source. But then if I wanted to add individual effects that kind of adjust that individual layer, that's where we could bring in these clone layers. So with this clone layer selected, let's go on up to filters, and we'll go down to border, and there is this stroke filter. Now this was added not crazy long ago in Motion, just a year or two. But what the stroke filter enables us to do, I can bring up the width. You'll see how it's giving me this outline around our person. And this is crazy handy for a bazillion different reasons. If you have my my Saber plugin, the main driving factor is this stroke filter. So very cool filter. So glad it's in Motion. With this stroke though, right now it's kind of expanding out and we want it to be overlapping our person. So let's go on over into the position and change it from outside over to inside. So now that stroke filter is overlapping our person. There's a whole bunch of stuff you could adjust. You could adjust fades if you wanted to. Fade outside. You can kind of get that edge looking how you want it. Another great way though, I kind of like a mass amount of blur over everything. I don't want it to have any sharp edges. So what I like to use is a Gaussian filter. But if I were to take this clone layer, go up to filters, blur, and add a Gaussian blur, and then crank this up, you'll notice that it's blurring our person as well. And maybe that's the effect you're going for. You could add in a blend mode, looks kind of cool and interesting. But what I want is for just our stroke to be affected. And that's why we introduced this clone layer. So if I come on over here to the bottom of our stroke filter, I can actually hide the source. So now all that's being blurred is our stroke filter. And I really like how this blur adds to the effect. So that's looking really cool. The problem is now our person, if we take a really close look here, is kind of emanating a glow. And again, that's cool for other stuff, but for this specific effect, we only want the glow effect to be happening on our person. So if we take our clone layer, I can right click and I'm gonna select add image mask. And image masks are a great way. They're basically Final Cut Pro draw masks and stuff, but on steroids, because you can use so much stuff as an image mask. You can use videos, you can use transparency layers, I'm doing a terrible job of describing it, but I love image masks because you can add trackers to them, so you can track them within the scene. That's one really cool feature of Motion. They're just awesome. If you've ever worked in After Effects, you'll know kind of what they're called, track mats over in After Effects. But by default, adding in this image mask tells Motion to automatically use the original layer as its own image mask. I'm not quite sure the logic behind it, but it's already cleaned up that edge. Now, if you don't happen to get lucky and Motion doesn't work in that specific way, you can just drag in our original layer as the image mask, and you can actually see what the effect is doing here. This is actually super cool. We've got this outline of the person. It's almost like you could do an invisibility effect with this specific thing if you wanted to. So by default, whenever you set a layer as the image mask layer in Motion, it's going to automatically disable whatever layer you just applied. So you have to re-enable it. But now you can see that she's got this nice outer glow to her, which is looking really stellar. So that's looking really cool. And then again, if we wanted to just dial this up a little bit more, we could push the colors ourselves. This is where I would trust either my friend Dylan John or Eric Lentz or Brad West, who really knows their stuff about color. Go check out their channels. But we can go ahead and dive in here. We'll do color wheels once again. And I'm doing this on the primary layer. So the stroke that we've added, that's not going to get affected in any way. But let's go ahead and do the classic teal and orange look, teal and red. I don't know. It's really up to you. And we'll just get it matching closer. So once you've got all the colors matching here, it's really going to pull this scene together cohesively. So that's looking pretty stellar. Okay. Finally, we have the dust elements. And again, we want to bring this scene together. So I'm going to make these dust elements match the color scheme here. So let's go on up to filters, color, and we can push one of these. Let's see how I want to do this. Maybe we'll do color wheels. I don't know. You could do, actually, let's do colorize. So we'll go filters, color, and we'll do colorize. And it's already starting to take place. You can see how that red's being brought in. So remap white, we could really push it hard to the reds. We could push it to the blues maybe if you wanted a bit of contrast, which I kind of dig it. I got to decide on that. Let's see. We'll go red for now. Maybe we'll do the far out ones to blue. So we'll push those to blue. We could adjust the black areas. You'll see how the black's kind of coming through with that screen filter. Let's just drop that all the way down to complete utter black. That way the screen blend mode that we added is going to be transparent in those black elements. Let's go ahead and copy this colorize filter that we've just added to this dust element. We'll add it to the other dust. Command V, so Command C, sorry, I just get so wrapped into it. Command C will copy, Command V will paste it. Motion will automatically add copy to the end of the title once you've done that. So now both of our dust elements are this red color. We could go crazy though and push one to the blue, which I really dig. So I'm gonna do that. There we go. And finally, we have this computer screen at the very front here that is blue. You could leave that. It's up to you. Let's go ahead and just do the colorize filter again. Command C, Command V. So now that's been pushed over to the red, so it matches everything. Looking pretty cool. Maybe the blue's the way to go. Kind of this, we'll go way too far with the blue, but that's looking good. Okay. So we've got all these elements, computer screens scrolling up, and there's a couple more elements I want to add for just extreme drama to this whole scene. So I love the camera rotation, kind of whatever you want to call that, upside down from Netflix, I don't know. So let's go ahead and add that in. We'll select our camera, we'll go to properties, and let's find our rotation parameter. We'll be at the very beginning here, and we'll just find the Z rotation. So as I'm rotating that, you can see how that's affecting the scene. So I'll just rotate it a little bit, somewhere in there, 12 degrees, adding a keyframe. And again, I've only added in a keyframe to this Z element. None of the X and Y elements are not getting that effect. So we'll just scoot on forward, and we'll just have this drop down to 0 degrees. So now that's going to slowly animate, and I feel like it just adds so much to the scene, having that slow rotation. It's, dare I say, cinematic. So I think that's looking really good. But there's one final element to pull this whole scene together. As you know, with the camera, if we were this close to somebody, the background would be blurry, different elements in the scene would be blurry, and that is what's really cool about motion, is the depth of field effects. So let's go on over to our camera and find depth of field. And I'm gonna go ahead and take an old sip of the tea here. Hello to Ben from England. There we go. Okay, so can we just all say hi to Ben? He's just a legend. He does a lot for the Final Cut Pro community behind the scenes. Just throw that out there. Ben, legend. Okay, so we've got this cool camera sweep. We've got everything going. Let's add in that depth of field. Coming over here to the left side, you'll see that we've got this depth of field blur amount. And if I crank it, absolutely nothing is going to happen, and that is because we need to actually enable depth of field. So if you go on up to your render settings and scroll on down, you're gonna see depth of field. So we'll enable that, and maybe you can see it inside of YouTube, but stuff's already starting to blur. So if I really crank it, you can see all those elements going out of focus. I like to keep it pretty subtle, so 10's pretty solid. Maybe just a little bit more. Now, there's two different types of depth of field inside of motion. One is very computer intensive. One is much faster, but it's not as realistic. So right now we're using, under our filter, it's set to Gaussian. And what we want, if we want this to look more realistic, we would select defocus. And the reason why this looks more realistic is because when our cameras blur out the background, light points become kind of circular. There's just different ways that this, it's, man, I'm lost for words today. But it becomes like a really nice circle there's that bokeh effect, and that's what the defocus filter is doing. It's much more realistic, and you can see the filter shape is a disc. Now, if you're feeling crazy, you have a very stylized idea in mind, you can change it to polygon, and so that's essentially less blades inside of your camera, and so that's going to give you more interesting shapes. So right now we've kind of created triangles. It's really hard to see here, but you can see those triangles are being blurred out, which is cool. Just a fun little thing you can do in motion. But I'm going to go ahead and change this back over to disk because I just like the more realistic thing, and we could dial that in just a bit. But as it is, our camera might actually, you'll see how it's kind of blurring out our person here. And that could be what you want. That's a cool effect, but I want the focus to be locked in on this person on the entire time. And there's multiple ways you could do this. You could come in here and find your focus offset, and you could keyframe the focus offset as you move the camera back. But if there's anything you should know about me, it's that I am super lazy, and if I don't have to do something manually, I'm not gonna do it. So we can actually select our camera, go up to behaviors, go to camera, and you'll see this focus filter. So selecting that, we can tell our camera what we want it to be focused on at all times. So I'm just gonna go ahead and drag in our person group, and let's set our transition speed to 0. So now, with the transition speed at 50%, it's going to essentially, if we take a look here at the behaviors, it's going to take 50% of this entire duration for the camera to slowly focus in on that object, which is a very cool feature. But I want it locked the entire time. So we're gonna just set that to 0%, and now it's going to be there the entire time. She's in focus, camera's backing out, everything else is out of focus, and it's looking pretty nice to me. We are getting very low frames right now because I'm streaming, but yeah, you get the idea there. So that's looking cool. Depth of field is going to crush your computer. Keep that in mind, but it's worth the end result. Okay, so we've got all of that dialed in, but we need to add in that final element that really makes this feel like Magnets Media, the ink droplets. That's what Magnets Media is so known for, and it's extremely simple to add in. So if we take a look up here, you'll notice that I have essentially grouped everything from my scene into a singular group. If you don't, if you accidentally create multiple groups, you can select everything in that and then right click and group it. But I'm also selecting, here's a funky thing with motion. Let me just clear this up because this is an issue I ran into all the time. So if you select a group and inside of that group are objects, then if I were to select everything, so we have singular objects in one group. Let me rename this. I think this is going to help a lot of people because this is an issue I ran into for a long time and I couldn't figure it out. Okay, so we have this computer group. This group has its own objects inside, right? This dust element is inside of our primary group. So this dust element is not in the computer group, right? So if I were to select backdrop, dust, and then everything inside of this computer group as this computer group is expanded and everything else, and then right click, motion's not gonna let me create a group. So you need to make sure that your groups are collapsed, right click, and then you can create a group. So throwing that out there because that was something that drove me crazy for a long time. So just make sure everything's kind of collapsed up and then you can easily add it all into a singular group. So now that we've got this singular group going on, I'm gonna right click and I'm going to once again use the image mask. With this image mask, like I told you earlier, you can use this image mask to drive really powerful dynamic looking masks. So we're gonna bring in that ink droplet effect. So if I enable it, let's see if we can, you can see it here, it's super massive. So let me go ahead and bring the properties of this, shrink it down to scale. There we go. And now I'm going to hide that. So we're gonna use that ink drop as the image mask. So click and drag that image mask over to the click and drag the ink drops over to the image mask. And right now, absolutely nothing's going on because our image mask by default under the source channel, this is kind of the driving factor of the mask. So currently it's set to alpha, which means that the mask is going to be driven by the alpha channels of this ink drop, and it does not have any. Right now it's just a black and white image. So we want to drive it by the black and white image. So I'm going to change the source channels from alpha over to luminance, and now we are going to be using the black and white image, and you can see how that's cutting out the frame. But it's cutting out the frame in the complete opposite way of what we want. So we need to go ahead and change the mask blend mode, which is currently set to add, which means that if it's white on our ink droplets, if it's a white image, it's going to retain the image. If it's black, it's going to delete the image. So we need to essentially reverse that and change it over to subtract. So now you can see that we're getting that really cool Magnets Media ink droplet effect. And to really showcase this, let me go ahead and change our render settings so it's just the color. You can see how we have got those black edges. Everything's looking super cinematic. It looks like we're coming out of her head. Maybe we would have some titles on the screen, but that is going to be kind of your main Magnets Media effect. You know, you've got all the 3D dimension, you've got the cool outlines streaking out. You might find that the person, this lower edge is a little distracting, so we could bring her down just a little bit. There we go. And then, yeah, so that, I mean, we've done it. Some little touch-ups you could do to really make this effect look nice is we could select our camera and go on over into the keyframe editor. So we can see that we've got some nice curves kind of going on here, but you could totally adjust these keyframes to really get the style that you're after. So I could select all of these and right-click, and let's just do ease both to make sure that there's some nice easing to those keyframes. And it's really hard to tell right now because of all the dropped frames that it needs easing, and hopefully your computer isn't struggling so hard as mine because they're not streaming, but it's hard to tell that it needs easing, but trust me, it does. So we've added that easing in, just again, selecting all of those keyframes in our keyframe editor, which you can get with Command 8. We'll right click and select ease both. And so that's going to force those into easing, just like in After Effects, you can ease stuff in your keyframe editor. Okay, we've done all that. How the heck do we get this over into Final Cut Pro so we can intercut it between multiple scenes? Because if you ask me, it would be really difficult to edit an entire Magnets Media style video inside of Motion. It's just going to tank your performance on your computer. So in my perspective, opinion, I would recommend that you export these individually. So for anybody that doesn't know how to export out of Motion, you just go on up to your share menu and we'll select Export Movie. We could just call it whatever we want. Then we could go into our settings. We'll go and change this over to video and audio, or just video only because we don't have any audio. And then the video codec, I'm going to recommend that you set it to Apple ProRes 422 or above. That's going to give you the best quality. If you're really scrimping by for some storage space on your computer, you could do H.264, but I really wouldn't do anything less than that if you're planning on intercutting this into your scene, just because you really need that maximum quality for this. So I would do at least Apple ProRes 422. Your color space, you can leave at Rec 709. Color channels, this is where things get interesting. So if you were to want this specific scene, wherever the edges are cut out here, you want that to be an alpha channel. You could change the format, the video codec I mean, from Apple ProRes 422 over to Apple ProRes 4444, the quadruple fours. And that, if I do that, I can change the color channels here over to color plus alpha. So that is how you could get an alpha channel out of this if you wanted to. Just know that that is going to make your file sizes absolutely enormous, because if you take a look down here, My file size is 421 megabytes for a 10-second clip. So just keep that in mind. 10 seconds is nearly half a gigabyte. So you can imagine what a full minute of this would be. The other side of the coin, H.264, is only 28 megabytes. So you just have to keep that in mind. Make sure that you know for sure that you want the alpha channel if you're going to go that route. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to export it with an alpha channel. Let's just do it. And we'll push next. We could save it wherever we want. Let me find Edit Like Magnets Media Exports. And we'll just call it version 3. And so in Motion, if you want to know how far something is exporting, there's a spinning wheel. You can click on it. And this is just like the export window that you see inside of Final Cut Pro. It looks a little bit different, but does the same thing. So that's going to go on through. Whew. Throat's getting tired here. And let's see, there's 43. That's crazy. You never know. You always wonder. You're like, is anybody going to watch my Motion videos? So thank you, everybody, for stopping by. I really appreciate it. So that's fully exported. Let's go ahead and take a look here inside of Finder. We'll go to our exports. And there it is. Exporting out. It looks really cool. It's got that 3D dimension. I mean, there's so many nuances to this effect that you could adjust to make it your own, but that is kind of how I would set this scene up. And I would just continue to find those different elements. Again, I went to Envato Elements, and I thought, okay, I need an industrial backdrop, so I looked that up. I looked up a person, I looked up a computer's monitor screen kind of scrolling through for the hacker effect. I was struggling to find the perfect computer monitor, so I had to go to Unsplash for that. But yeah, they had most of the elements I needed, so that's why I use Envato. But yeah, you know, it looks all right. It's not too shabby for an hour of work. Not too bad. And you would do this much faster once you've kind of learned the ins and outs of Motion. And if you weren't live streaming and having to talk through all the different steps, I was able to actually pull this whole effect out in about 8 minutes or so. So once you kind of learn the different elements, you're going to be so much faster. It might seem like an hour is forever. Honestly, pulling this out in an hour is great too. It's really not bad. So I'm not trying to brag like, oh, I'm so fast in Motion. I'm just saying that like once you learn Motion, it's much easier. So yeah, man, holy moly. I will say, if you are a patron, I'm going to be uploading the project file for this, and I'm going to be uploading the various elements I used. So you shouldn't need an Envato Elements subscription for that. I'm going to double check the legalities around that. So I can't 100% promise it, but I'm going to look into it. I think it's okay. I don't know. I got to read the terms of conditions and all that stuff. But yeah, I'll be uploading that so you can hopefully, you know, follow along with this extremely long live stream and hopefully build it for yourself. But yeah, man, how are you guys? Thank you so much. Technics are way to flex. let me pull this in. There we go. Yes. Oh, Patrick Masters needs to get that mug. Yes, you know, I had merch up on my store for a bit, and I was super pumped. I put a bunch of money into it, and then I didn't sell a single element, and it's mostly because of my fault, because I didn't really consider why somebody would want to buy merch. I was like, oh, just slap my face on it, because everybody loves my face. I should have considered, you know, having some catchy phrases or something, but I only sold one piece ever, thanks to James. Shout out, James, if you've got that beanie still. Appreciate you. So I only ever sold one element. I might dive into merch again someday. I might sell my mugs again someday. But at the moment, I was like, you know, I think my time is better spent working on plugins and just making tutorials. So, humbling experience, let me tell you. You think people want to wear your face on their shirt, and then you get surprised that nobody wants your face on their shirt. Yeah, it's super fun, and my feelings weren't too hurt. I should have just taken like a little bit longer to think about what I was making, but man, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate you all stopping by. I am so shocked at how fast my voice goes away doing these live streams. I don't know if I'm just like projecting to the camera or something, but very grateful that you stopped by. Hopefully you learned at least one thing from this stream. I am working on a motion course right now. And so with that being said, I have deleted all my social media off my phone because I just need to hone in on making this course. I keep getting distracted, and I am so addicted to YouTube. It's so bad. So I've deleted YouTube off my phone. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop uploading videos. I will at least be having one regular video every week until I get this course out. And then I'm hoping to do a few more of these live streams because they're super fun. And there's a lot of nuances to building stuff in Motion that I don't get to really express when I do the cut down videos. But with the social media side of things that I was talking about is if you need to get in touch with me, the very best way is to either reach out through the Patreon Discord, because I will still be there, and then also just emailing me, Dylan@thefinalcutbro.com. Those are the best ways to get in touch with me because I'm just not going to see your messages on any other social media. I'm sorry. So I just need to hone in, get this course done as fast as I can, and it's going to be an absolute banger. I'm so excited to get it out to the world. It's just taking a while because I'm a distracted human being. So. Any hints on new free plugins coming up on my Gumroad store, GlobeSync? Probably not yet because I got to get this course done. But there's a hope. Oh, and I should say, if you're a patron, one of my big things is my monthly plugins that I upload there, and I'm still going to be maintaining that. That's super important to me that you guys get that. So that's on the roll of things that I'm going to be doing. But yeah, man, thank you everybody. Oh, beard looking sharp today. Thank you. You know, I should have. I'll take the compliment. It looks all right. You know, I appreciate it. But yeah, hey, thank you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and log off and let my throat take a rest because I got to record 3 or 4 more course sections this afternoon, so I gotta get this voice back. So thank you everybody so much, and I am looking forward to our next live stream. I will see you then.